Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to Science in Easy English. Are octopuses smarter than we think?
Spoiler alert. Yes. Yes, they
They
are.
really are. And I want you, the listener, to take a second and try to imagine an alien intelligence.
Like from a movie?
Right, but not something arriving on a spaceship. I mean, an intelligence from an evolutionary branch right here on Earth. One that split from ours roughly 600 million years ago.
Oh, wow. That is a massive evolutionary gap.
Exactly. Back then, our shared ancestors were essentially tiny, flat, worm-like creatures, just sort of crawling through the primordial muck.
Not exactly the pinnacle of brain power.
No, not at all. And from that split, one branch eventually led to us, vertebrates, mammals, primates. But the other branch took a wildly, wildly different path.
It's a path that really forces us to reconsider the basic architecture of a mind. I mean, we are so accustomed to the vertebrate model.
Right, the classic brain in a skull.
Exactly. A centralized brain encased in a protective skull, communicating down through a spinal cord to a rigid skeleton. The octopus just throws that entire blueprint out the window.
It really does.
Yeah.
So today we're taking a deep dive into the mind-bending intelligence of the octopus.
And we have a ton of incredible data to go through.
We do. When you look at the latest stack of research we've pulled together for this, and I'm talking everything from abstracts at the 2026 Cephalopod Neuroscience Conference to cutting-edge soft robotics engineering, plus some major animal welfare reports.
There's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But when you look at all of it, you realize we're trying to decode a completely independent evolution of sentience. Our mission today is to synthesize these different fields to understand exactly how the octopus mind works.
And why it completely shatters our traditional assumptions about intelligence.
Right. Because it completely upends our biases. To understand them, we really have to let go of the idea that intelligence requires a centralized vertebrate body plan.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to grasp how their minds operate, we first have to look at their physical hardware, which is just bizarre.
It really is. Like, they have about 500 million neurons.
Which is a lot, right?
Yeah, to put that in perspective for you, that is roughly the same computational power as a dog.
Oh, wow. Like a golden retriever.
Exactly like a golden retriever.
Yeah.
So we are dealing with a highly complex nervous system, but the anatomical setup is entirely alien.
Yeah, let's look at the cardiovascular system for a second. They don't have one heart. They have three.
Wait, 3 hearts.
3 of them. 2 of those are branchial hearts, and they pump blood exclusively to the gills to pick up oxygen. And then the third is a systemic heart that pumps that newly oxygenated blood to the rest of the body.
See, with 3 hearts pumping, you'd think they'd be the most athletic, tireless swimmers in the entire ocean.
You really would.
But if you watch footage of them, they almost always just crawl or walk along the seafloor. Why build a 3-heart engine if you're just gonna, take a stroll?
It's because of a massive physiological bottleneck.
Yeah.
That central systemic heart. It actually stops beating when they swim.
Wait, what? It just stops?
It literally stalls out.
Uh-huh.
Because fast swimming requires jet propulsion, right? Which means the octopus has to forcefully contract its mantle cavity to shoot a jet of water out of a siphon.
Okay, that makes sense.
But those intense muscle contractions create so much internal pressure that it physically stops the systemic heart from pumping.
So swimming is actually incredibly exhausting for them.
Exactly. Their primary oxygen delivery system basically shuts down the moment they hit the gas.
That is wild. And the oxygen delivery system itself is completely different from ours, too. Their blood isn't red, it's blue.
Yes. It utilizes a copper-based protein called hemocyanin rather than our iron-based hemoglobin.
Why copper instead of iron, though?
It comes down to thermodynamics. Iron-based blood is incredibly efficient for us on land, but in the near-freezing, high-pressure, low-oxygen environments of the deep ocean, iron holds onto oxygen way too tightly.
Oh, so it just won't let go of the oxygen when the tissues need it.
Right, it won't let go. Hemocyanin, using copper, has a different binding affinity. It readily releases oxygen into the tissues, even when the surrounding water is freezing and totally oxygen depleted.
That is so cool.
And when it's deoxygenated, their blood is completely clear.
Mm.
But the second it binds to oxygen, it turns this rich, vivid blue.
So we have blue blood, 3 hearts that stall out when they swim, and the neuron count of a golden retriever.
Yep. And we haven't even gotten to the brain yet.
Right, the physical brain is the most bizarre part. The central brain of an octopus is shaped like a donut.
A literal donut shape.
And passing right through the middle of that donut hole is their esophagus. Their throat runs directly through their brain.
I know, it sounds like a terrible design flaw.
Very.
But evolution operates by modifying existing structures,
Hmm.
not starting from scratch.
Right.
The ancestral cephalopod body plan folded and developed over millions of years in a way that just happened to leave the digestive tract routed right through the central nervous system.
It's like building a state-of-the-art supercomputer, but deciding to run the building's industrial trash chute straight through the center of the motherboard.
That is exactly what it's like.
Every piece of garbage dropping down is a risk to the hardware. If an octopus swallows something too large or too sharp, it can physically tear its own brain from the inside out.
Which is exactly why they have to rely on a highly specialized feeding mechanism. They can't swallow large chunks, so they use a serrated beak-like structure called a radula.
Oh, like a tiny chainsaw tongue?
Yeah, combined with venom and enzyme-packed saliva, they essentially inject a crab, wait for the enzymes to dissolve the internal tissues, and then they drink it.
They just slurp it up.
Yeah, they had to turn their prey into a highly digestible, gooey liquid to avoid brain damage.
A brain-safe slurp. If you're sitting there right now trying to imagine what it would be like to perceive the world if every single time you ate, you were risking internal brain trauma, I mean, it completely alters the physical stakes of their daily existence.
Oh, absolutely.
But that central donut brain is only handling a fraction of the processing, right?
What's fascinating here is how the octopus nervous system evolved to solve a massive computational problem. They have 8 arms with 0 bones.
Right, they're just pure muscle.
Exactly. Those arms can bend at any point, in any direction, twisting and extending endlessly. If one central brain had to calculate the exact spatial coordinates, the muscle tensions, and all the sensory inputs for every millimeter of those 8 arms in real time,
It would just overload.
the system would freeze up entirely. The processing lag would be fatal. So the octopus delegates, 2/3 of its 500 million neurons aren't even in its head.
They are distributed throughout the arms themselves.
Exactly. They form a segmented axial nerve cord running down each arm with massive clusters of neurons called ganglia.
So they're effectively satellite brains.
That's a great way to put it. Satellite brains.
And the processing power goes right down to the suckers, too. We were looking at data showing a single sucker can contain up to 10,000 specialized neurons.
10,000 in one sucker.
Meaning each sucker is tasting the water, feeling the texture of a rock, and deciding whether to latch on or let go, almost completely independently.
It is a brilliantly networked hybrid system. The central brain is like the executive officer, setting the overarching strategy.
Like, we hungry, let's hunt.
Or, there's a predator, let's hide. But the arms execute all the real-time tactical maneuvers. They explore, grasp, and react without needing step-by-step approval from headquarters.
Okay, but if the central brain is physically cut off from the arm's exact locations, how does it coordinate something complex, like foraging?
Well, the behavioral data from a 2025 study published in Biology Open illustrates this beautifully.
The blind foraging study.
Yes. Researchers wanted to observe how they forage when they can't see, so they gave California 2 spot octopuses an opaque dome with an item hidden inside.
So the octopus couldn't see the item at all. It had to rely purely on touch and taste.
Right. And they found that the octopus usually recruited 3 to 5 arms simultaneously to explore the inside of the dome.
And what really stands out there is the total lack of specialization. There's no left-handed or right-handed dominance. All 8 arms are equally capable.
Yeah, it usually just taps the nearest neighboring arm to help out.
That redundancy is incredibly efficient.
It really is. If an arm is busy holding onto a rock or If it's lost to a predator, the system doesn't crash. Another arm just takes over seamlessly.
And isn't this specific biological architecture actually inspiring entirely new fields of robotics right now?
It is soft robotics.
How does that even work, though? Because you can't exactly build a robot out of muscle and nervous tissue.
Well, you build it using fluidics. Engineers are designing robotic limbs that use fluid flows like air or water moving through soft channels to coordinate movement and suction.
Oh, that makes sense.
Instead of a centralized computer chip calculating the exact geometry of a fragile object to figure out how to pick it up, the physical material and the local fluidic circuits do the computing.
So the robotic arm just bumps into an object, and the localized pressure changes cause it to gently wrap around and grip it.
Exactly. The intelligence is built into the physical structure itself, just like the octopus arm.
I have to challenge something here, though. If the arms are essentially independent tactical units, processing their own sensory data and making their own motor decisions, is the central brain even aware of what they are doing?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because if I close my eyes, I know exactly where my hand is. Does the octopus?
Usually, no. The central brain does not have a complete proprioceptive map of the body. It literally doesn't know the exact spatial coordinates of its arms.
So the brain just says, go find food, and then just waits for an arm to tap it on the shoulder and say, hey, boss, found a crab.
Pretty much. But to prevent the arms from constantly tying themselves into knots, there is a neural ring that bypasses the central brain entirely.
Oh, so the arms talk to each other.
Yes, it connects the arms directly to each other. So while the central brain doesn't know where the arms are in space, the arms know where each other are. They communicate laterally to avoid tangling.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We know how the decentralized hardware operates. But what kind of intelligence runs on that network?
The software, so to speak.
Exactly, because the behavioral data looks remarkably similar to the complex cognition we usually see in primates or corvids.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the veined octopus, for example. It finds hollowed-out coconut halves, stacks them like nesting bowls, tucks them under its body, and awkwardly stilt walks across the exposed ocean floor.
It is so funny to watch.
It is. And if a predator shows up, it snaps the halves together and hides inside its portable armor.
And see, tool use of this caliber is a major cognitive benchmark. They aren't just picking up a rock to smash a clam right in front of them.
Right, they're recognizing the future utility of an object.
Exactly. They're carrying it around when it offers zero immediate benefit, specifically so they can deploy it later. That requires a capacity for foresight and planning.
And it goes beyond just survival tactics into flat-out mischief.
Oh, the aquarium stories.
Captive octopuses are notorious for figuring out the exact mechanics of their artificial environments. They dislike bright aquarium lights, so they learn to shoot highly targeted jets of water out of their tanks to deliberately short-circuit the bulbs above them.
Which is brilliant and highly annoying for the staff.
Or they map out the security guard schedules, wait until the room is completely empty, squeeze out of their tanks, crawl across the dry floor to a neighboring tank to eat the fish.
And then sneak back home.
Yeah, they sneak back and pull the lid shut behind them like nothing happened.
These are highly adaptive, creative solutions. They are analyzing a novel artificial environment and manipulating it. And we see this cognitive flexibility extend into complex social recognition, too.
Right. The facial recognition study from the Seattle Aquarium proves exactly that.
That study is wild.
Researchers had two keepers interact with giant Pacific octopuses over 2 months. Both keepers wore identical uniforms, but one keeper was instructed to be nice, regularly feeding them. The other was the mean keeper, who gently poked them with a bristly stick.
Not fun for the octopus.
Not fun. And the octopuses quickly learned to visually distinguish the two humans based purely on their faces. When the nice keeper walked by, the octopuses would approach the glass. But when the mean keeper appeared, they would hide and defensively alter their skin color.
So they hold grudges based on past interactions, And they recognize individuals across species boundaries.
Which perfectly tees up that 2024 study in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. We always thought of octopuses as solitary hunters, right?
Yeah, the lone wolves of the sea.
But it turns out they frequently engage in interspecies collaboration. They will literally team up with fish, like groupers.
How does that even work?
The fish acts as the scout. It hovers over a crevice where prey is hiding, signaling the location. And then the octopus uses its flexible arms to reach in and flush the prey out.
It's a mutualistic relationship. Working together increases the hunting success rate for both species by combining their specialized physical traits.
But the researchers caught something incredible on camera during these hunts: the punching. If a fish in the hunting party isn't pulling its weight, or if it tries to snatch the food without contributing, the octopus will literally strike the fish.
Just a swift, explosive punch with an arm.
Which makes you wonder if an animal is capable of holding grudges against specific humans, playing pranks with water jets, and physically punching a lazy coworker. Doesn't that imply a rich internal emotional life?
The scientific consensus is increasingly leaning exactly that way. They seem to possess actual affective states, meaning this isn't just a reflex, but a lived emotional experience.
That is profound.
It is. But sustaining that level of complex adaptive behavior requires incredible biological resilience. And the ocean is a very volatile environment.
Right, which brings us to their ultimate biological superpower. This is the genetic trick that seriously borders on science fiction.
It really does.
Because unlike mammals, octopuses cannot actively regulate their body temperature. If you get cold, you shiver to generate heat.
Right.
But if an octopus is in cold water, its internal temperature simply drops to match the water.
And for a creature relying on a massive, complex nervous system, a sudden temperature drop is catastrophic.
Because of the proteins, right?
Exactly. The proteins that make up their neural pathways have very specific folded shapes. If the temperature plummets, those structures become rigid and neural transmission slows down or halts entirely.
So they would just freeze up.
Yeah. For most species, adapting to a colder climate requires thousands of generations of slow DNA mutations to eventually build cold-resistant proteins.
But the octopus doesn't have thousands of generations. So they just bypass the slow evolutionary wait list and edit their own RNA on the fly.
It's incredible.
A recent study in Cell looked at the California two-spot octopus. Researchers moved them from a warm tank around 22 degrees Celsius into a cold tank sitting at 13 degrees Celsius.
A huge drop.
And within hours, the octopuses made over 13,000 localized edits to their RNA.
To appreciate how radical that is, we need to look at how proteins are normally built. Typically, biology operates on a strict one-way street.
Right. DNA is the locked blueprint.
Exactly. DNA acts as the permanent blueprint locked in the cell nucleus. It prints a perfect copy of itself called messenger RNA.
And then that RNA goes to work.
Yeah, that messenger RNA travels out into the cell, acting as the instruction manual to build a specific protein. The manual is supposed to perfectly match the blueprint.
But the octopus hacks its own messenger RNA.
It physically alters the chemical letters in the instruction manual before the protein is even built.
It's like playing a highly demanding video game, and when your console starts to overheat, the software reaches out and physically rearranges the copper wiring on the motherboard to handle the new temperature so the game doesn't crash.
That is a perfect analogy.
They are rewriting the amino acid sequence of their neural proteins in real time.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains their massive adaptability. They sacrificed the slow, stable progression of DNA evolution for immediate, extreme physical plasticity.
They just rewrite themselves.
They can literally, physically rewire the molecular machinery of their brains to optimize for the exact water temperature they happen to be swimming in today.
So, what does this all mean? We have an animal with a dog-level neuron count distributed through 8 semi-independent limbs. It uses tools, holds grudges, punches fish, and rewrites its own genetic code.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it forces us to confront a heavy ethical and biological reality.
Absolutely. When you have this level of neurological sophistication, you inevitably have the capacity for suffering. A major report commissioned by the Brooks Institute synthesized years of evidence proving that cephalopods are sentient.
They actually ran them through the mammalian Bain test.
Yes, the chamber test.
Right. Researchers gave octopuses a choice between two chambers in a tank. Once the octopus settled in its preferred chamber, it was given a noxious, painful injection.
Oh, poor guy.
Then they moved it to the less preferred chamber and administered a local anesthetic that relieved the pain.
And what happened?
The result was undeniably clear. The octopuses developed a lasting, strong aversion to the chamber, where they experienced pain, and shifted their preference entirely to the chamber where they received pain relief.
And this tells us something crucial. It's not just nociception.
Nociception being just a physical reflex.
Right. They don't reflexively jerk away from a sharp object the way a simple organism might, and then immediately forget about it.
Right.
They consciously experience the negative emotional state of pain.
They remember it.
They remember it, seek out relief from it, and alter their long-term behavior to avoid it. We also see them actively grooming their wounds and exhibiting physical stress markers like erratic skin blanching in poor environments.
And this data is actively driving legislative pushes right now to ban commercial octopus farming, based on the argument that you simply cannot ethically factory farm a highly sentient creature that requires complex environmental stimulation.
It makes complete sense.
But this brings us to the ultimate biological paradox of the octopus. Evolution built this brilliant, metabolically expensive, deeply sensitive brain, only to immediately destroy it.
It is the great tragedy of their existence. They are simiparous.
Which means they reproduce exactly once, and then they die?
Yes. Their lifespans are devastatingly short. Many smaller species don't even make it a year.
Even the big ones, right?
Yeah, the giant Pacific octopus, which can grow to over 100 pounds and is highly intelligent, maxes out at maybe 5 years. And it's not because they wear out or get eaten. It is a programmed death.
Orchestrated by the optic gland situated between their eyes.
Exactly. Once an octopus reproduces, this gland initiates a cascade of hormonal changes. It effectively shuts down their digestive tracts and triggers rapid, irreversible cellular aging.
That is so sad.
The females will diligently guard their eggs, slowly starving to death as their bodies shut down, dying right around the time the eggs hatch.
But wait, I have to ask why. Why would evolution invest so much energy into building this incredible energy-hungry mind only to install a biological self-destruct button?
It seems counterintuitive.
There are plenty of vulnerable prey animals that live for decades. Why couldn't they evolve an armored shell and a long lifespan?
It comes down to a prevailing theory known as the Packard scenario. Hundreds of millions of years ago, their ancestors did have hard outer shells, similar to a modern nautilus.
Okay.
But the ocean changed. Huge, fast-jawed fish evolved. To exploit new food sources in tight spaces and escape these new apex predators, the ancestors of the octopus shed their heavy shells.
They just ditched the armor.
They gained mobility, yes, but they sank to the predator-rich ocean floor completely naked.
So they threw away their armor to move faster.
Exactly. But being a soft, slow-moving protein snack on the seafloor is a death sentence. To survive without armor, they had to get incredibly smart, incredibly fast.
They had to outthink the sharks.
They evolved massive brains, dynamic skin for active camouflage, and complex problem-solving skills just to make it through the day. But here is the catch. Massive brains require a massive amount of energy.
How much energy?
An octopus has to consume up to 4% of its entire body weight every single day just to fuel that nervous system.
Wow, that metabolic tax is astronomical.
It's completely unsustainable over a long period.
Yeah.
In the brutal economics of evolution, you cannot burn that much metabolic energy fueling a massive brain, have zero physical armor, and also invest in the long-term cellular maintenance required to live for 20 years.
Something had to give.
Right. So they optimize for speed. They grow at an astonishing rate. They reproduce massively, laying tens of thousands of eggs. and then they die. They traded longevity for a brief, explosive burst of neurological brilliance.
A brief, brilliant life. Man, we've covered a vast amount of ground today. From copper-based blue blood and throats running through donut-shaped brains to their networked, decentralized arms.
It is a totally different way of being alive.
We've seen how they creatively manipulate their world, rewrite their own RNA to survive the cold, and ultimately pay the price with their fleeting existence. This science fundamentally forces us to redefine what an intelligent alien might look like.
It proves that intelligence is not a single linear ladder leading straight up to human mammals. It is a vast, multidimensional landscape, and the octopus is sitting on the peak of a completely separate mountain.
I love that. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final mind-bending concept to mull over. We talked about a paper from Frontiers in Systems Neuroscience, detailing how 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are in its arms.
Those satellite brains.
Right. We know those arms make independent tactical decisions to taste, touch, and move. And we know the central brain is largely cut off from the exact spatial awareness of what those arms are doing.
It's just delegating.
But get this, if an octopus arm is completely severed, it doesn't just twitch. It will continue to react to stimuli, proactively grasp at objects, and even attempt to feed a non-existent mouth for quite some time.
Which is horrifying, but also amazing.
So the researchers pose a haunting question. What if there isn't just one single consciousness inside an octopus?
Oh, wow.
If the central brain is physically divorced from the localized processing of the limbs, what if that decentralized network means each individual arm possesses its own subjective experience, its own idiosyncratic field of consciousness?
9 minds in one body.
Exactly. What is it actually like to be an octopus arm? I'm going to leave you to ponder that one. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.